If we can get the regular council meeting underway here. So if we call for approval of the agenda now, Ms. Bellingham, any additions, deletions?
Yes, there is one addition. There is a letter to add as item 11B. It's the letter from Mr. Richard Madison's solicitor seeking council to have him come and delegate for council to seek reconsideration of the demolition of something.
Okay. Well, I'll make sure that's added under 11B. Put it under here. Okay.
Aircon in April.
Yeah, whoever changed the temperature, that was very nice of you.
Stand out over there.
Is it too hot?
Too cold.
Freezing.
Too hot, too cold?
Too cold.
Your council is freezing. Shut her down.
Yeah.
There, it's salty.
We're not normally that cool. Okay. So, yeah.
So moved.
Yeah.
Amended.
Moved as amended, Councillor Croft. We have a seconder, do we? Second. Councillor Medlock, thank you, sir. All those in favor? Contrary, motion carries. Adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting held April 10th. Okay, thank you. Councillor Dybel, Councillor Erickson, moving and seconding. All those in favor? Contrary, motion carries. Record of the public hearing held on April 10th. Motion to receive, I guess. Councillor Croft, moving.
Second.
Seconder, Councillor Smith, thank you. All those in favor? Contrary, motion carries. Thank you. And our apologies to our esteemed delegations. I'm sure both our delegations are well aware of council procedure and how it is sometimes a lengthy procedure when one gets into public hearings. But I'm going to start with our distinguished gentleman from KPMG to talk to us about our audited consolidated financial statements. Understand it's a boring read, which I guess under auditing standards is good news. Exciting reads and audits is not good news. So congratulations to Mr. Cordes and his staff for good work on running the finances. If that's mood lighting, Mr. Portalowski, we got to.
It's what it is.
Yeah, we'll just let his jacket show us the way it is. Okay. Okay. Sir.
Good evening. For the members in the public audience, my name is Sean Reed, and I'm a partner with KPMG. And KPMG's role is to audit the consolidated financial statements of the District of Hope to make sure that those financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with public sector accounting standards. So, we started our audit in early March and completed it earlier this evening when I had a separate meeting with council, reviewed the audited results with them. Our draft auditor's report will be dated today after I see later on that council will be approving those financial statements. And that report basically says that the financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with public sector accounting standards, which are the standards that the district must follow. So it is what we call a clean opinion in the auditor's lingo. I'm not going to read the draft report. Very boring, as you say, and boring is good when it comes to auditor's opinions. So I will leave it very short, sweet at that, and if Mayor and Council have questions, be happy to answer.
Well, we certainly appreciate you enduring the lengthy wait to get in front of us. Obviously, KPMG has a very good name in the field, so it always has credibility when you use a firm like KPMG to review your financial goings on. So we appreciate your expertise. Comments, questions from council or from administration? Mr. Portalowski.
Your Worship, I think for the public, it's clear that they should understand what the audit is doing is it's reinforcing the fact that the financial management of the district remains sound and that there are no questions of fraud or anything like that. And they should be aware of that. Sometimes when you say things like it's a clean sheet audit, members of the public may not understand what that means. But what you're trying to say, I believe, is it's a good audit, and there are no deficiencies that have been found with the management financially of the district.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
But no money bags hidden have been found, unfortunately.
Yeah, that would result in a very interesting conversation.
Oh, no, just forgotten money, not mishandled money.
No, we don't look for forgotten money, but if we did notice some, we would certainly bring it to management's attention.
Well, we certainly appreciate you coming and joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but we won't hold it against you.
I will stay through item number 7 and then promptly take my leave. So.
Okay, thanks. And Mr. Van Wyck, we invited Mr. Van Wyck, as council will recollect. He is a long-standing member of the Mennonite Central Committee, of the team that works dealing with homelessness issues. And Mr. Van Wyck, I always appreciate your passion for your subject. I don't necessarily sometimes appreciate the gravity of the subject matter, because there's quite often some sad news attached to what you present, but there's some very good work that takes place through Mr. Van Wyck's organization and all those he works with. So we have some information to digest tonight, and Mr. Van Wyck, as I mentioned to the previous delegation, thank you for enduring a lengthy wait, and we'll double your pay for that, because you volunteered to come, so we can double. Appreciate you helping out. I think I owe you a lunch for that wait, so hold me to that. And the floor is yours, as long as you need it.
So they just goes forward, right?
Yes.
Your Honorable Mayor and Council, thank you for the invitation to be here. We are having available now the preliminary results of the 2017 Fraser Valley Regional District Homeless Count. I'm not getting this with the... Just the next slide. Yeah, thank you. So there you see the comparison in the number of people who live homeless that have been surveyed by us on March the 8th. And you can see that there has been a significant jump in the number of people who live homeless from 2014 to 2017. It's about 73–74% increase overall in the region. We saw a somewhat of a reduction here in the 2011–2014 era, and now it has increased. Next slide, please. There you see the change by municipality, and again, in the case of Abbotsford and Chilliwack, we have seen significant increases. Abbotsford from 151 to 274, a significant jump, and in Chilliwack from 73 to 221. Mission, interestingly enough, there has been a reduction in the number, and then in Hope, an increase from 2014, but lower than your highest number so far, that was in 2011 of 43. Next slide. And then just gives you a bit of the same story in terms of how in Hope it has changed over the years, the numbers. Yeah, we can move on. Boston Bar we can skip because it's just one part of this presentation, because there's such a low number in Boston Bar, but we don't separate it out from Hope, but we don't have to spend any time on that one. So here we have the age distribution of people who live homeless, and you can see what color is that? The bluer color?
Yeah.
Is FVRD. I'm not always sure what colors. My wife says I'm colorblind. So. But the brown, I think I'm pretty sure about that is brown, it represents hope. So you can see the age distribution in those age categories of 20 to 29, 30 to 39, 40 is fairly similar across the region. Although in hope there is a bit of a higher proportion of people in an older category, and again in the 50 to 59 too. So that is an interesting phenomenon. And then interestingly enough, as you can see now, don't be fooled by this, because you know in Boston Bar there was only 5 people, 6 people counted, so this doesn't really represent, you know, can't pay much attention to it because it's such a small population. But what is, so if you ignore that bar and you look at this one here, you know, the extent to which, you know, when people get to this age, there's always the question, okay, so why are there so few people homeless? Well, I suppose it is the mortality rate is higher amongst people living homeless, or they don't live as long as other people because of the harsh conditions and the conditions that they endure or have to live with, and therefore their life comes to an end earlier than the general population. Next slide. Gender distribution, again, it is similar, the gender distribution across the province is similar to previous counts, and in the case of Hope, you have slightly higher proportion of people who have identified as males compared to the FVRD, and you have therefore fewer women than in the FVRD. Next slide. This was a new question this year, asking people how many of them have been ministry care, meaning Ministry of Children and Family. And so this bears out anecdotal evidence that we've had over the years of a significant number of people who have been in ministry care and end up living homeless. So it is somewhat of a commentary on our care regime, so to speak. Not to say that all of that is bad, but clearly, and I think we've heard many other reports from various other sources in the province over the years about the concerns about ministry care of children in care of the ministry. So yeah, a significant proportion of people have been in ministry care, and in the region you can see that about almost half, whereas in Hope it's somewhat lower. Yes. We can move, just to save time, we can move to the next slide, we can skip this one. So there is the presence of health issues amongst, that we call health issues amongst people who live homeless in Hope. So again, similar to what we have come across the region, is there is a significant prevalence of addiction amongst people who live homeless, as well as mental health issues. So and then in this bar here, we have asked the question, okay, those that have self-identified that they have an addiction issue, how many of them say that they currently have treatment? And you can see it's a low number. And it's probably partly because there is, you know, it speaks to the availability of services to respond to that, but it also speaks to people's readiness or not to make use of existing services. So both of those, I think, plays into that number there. Mental health illness or mental illness similarly. And again, we know that the services that are available in the mental health field as well as in addictions treatment field are generally good services. There's good professionals, but the reach of those services, the extent to which we can respond to the presence, the presence of addictions and mental health issues is not adequate at this point. Move on, please. Boston Bar, we can move past that. That's just the same presentation of the earlier slide, just in a different format. We can skip that one as well. We can move forward. Yeah, go ahead, please. Another one. Then, this was a new question too this year. We wanted to know, to what extent do people have access to either a family doctor or a walk-in clinic? And so it was good to know that people do, a significant number of people do have access to either a family doctor or a walk-in clinic, but there's still a significant proportion who do not. And in Hope, that proportion of those that do not have access or have not reported having access is somewhat higher than in the rest of the region. Aboriginal identity, again, as we look across the region, we see that the number of people who identify as indigenous or with Aboriginal identity gets higher the further east we move in the valley, proportionally. Okay. That is just an overview of the services being used by people, that they say what they have been used, and this is the MAH00151 picture. So if you go on to the next slide, please, you will see the first 3 or 4 is similar as the 3 top or 4 top ones of services that people typically access. And not surprisingly, that food is high up there, using extreme weather shelters and also emergency facilities. Barriers to housing. So again, that's the MAH00151. So if you go to the next slide, you will see similarly again, it's issues of affordability, it's issues of suitability, and evictions is significantly the ones that are the barriers to housing. Yes, please. Sources of income is the MAH00151 picture, and then again the next one for Hope. Again, the main source of income for people who live homeless would be the welfare system to a large extent, and then following by some other forms of income or sources of income. Length of residency in the current community. So it would appear from this slide that in the case of Hope, that there is a significant proportion of people who are short-term homeless, it would appear, or newly homeless, 33%, whereas in the other, the longer the time of homelessness goes, the fewer there are in the Hope area. Go ahead, please. This is always an a question that people want to know: where do the people come from? So in this case, this is what this slide tells us, is that, so we know that even in the region that most people that are homeless now in our region have indicated they are from other parts of BC. That's the case in Hope too, 43% or 42%, and also some from Metro Vancouver. But other parts of the province is a significant contributor to, or it's interesting to note that a significant number of people have said that they are from other parts of the province that they have come here for. Yes, please. That one is, this is just the presence of immigrant or refugees, so the population was so small it's not that significant. Same here, we can skip that one. And then the sexual identity, we've asked people to also self-identify their sexual identity, and so there is clearly that most people self-identify as straight, but there is a significant bisexual population. Yep. And then, so in terms of what will follow this preliminary results is a further deeper analysis of the findings, some cross-tabulation, some further deeper explanations, and that should be available hopefully somewhere by the middle of June, which will be a regional report with community-specific deeper analysis as well. And then today was part of a meeting with the Metro Vancouver team that have done the same work in Metro Vancouver on the same date for us to look at cross-cutting issues in the whole Lower Mainland, basically, to see how we can position that and what is there to put forward in terms of to speak to where funding should potentially come from. If you look at the presence of Aboriginal people, if you look at the presence of people with addictions and mental health issues, then it's clear that it's also a health services issue. and not only a housing issue. So I leave it there, and if there are questions or commentary, I certainly can try and answer some of the questions, if you have time for that.
A couple quick questions, I'm sure council will have many. First question would be, assume the hypothetical for a moment that finances were not an issue. Given your level of exposure in this field and level of expertise, what would you see as a solution to dealing with homelessness within the FDRD and Hope in particular?
I think we need to would have to expand services around addictions treatment, and detoxification first, and then addictions treatment, and then supportive housing and meaningful engagement of people once they come out of treatment. And on the mental health side, similarly, more services there, and again, ongoing, permanent supportive housing, care, and ways for people to be, to the extent they can be meaningfully part of community of one sort, of either through part-time work or some volunteering opportunities. But that would be my quick thoughts, quick responses to that. And then, so it would be investing in housing stock, supportive housing. So you have to build, there has to be brick and mortar options, but there could also be other more creative ways to provide the living quarters, so to speak, but the ongoing support, as well as to provide people with a meaningful engagement once they come out of treatment is very important. I think we lack that.
Now this is a very...
Not only here, we lack it across the country.
Yeah, for sure. This is maybe an obscure question, and maybe it's not one that's at the right time. But now, as an individual moves through the treatment regime, he or she gets through treatment. Have there been any studies as to the level of success if he or she moves back into his or her former community, or do they have to move to another community established in a peer group? Because obviously the natural assumption would be if someone has friendships based on sort of a lifestyle per se, where maybe all their friends have drug issues, shall we say, because people with similar issues tend to gravitate together. I think that's kind of a bit of a, goes without saying. Have there been any studies as to, what is most successful or what is required to see a person through a successful transition?
Yeah, I'm not an expert in treatment of addictions and what best practices. I cannot speak authoritatively about that. But based on what I do know is that, and I can draw on the example of the circles of support and accountability that is a program that is run, or the MTC is involved in too, where you create a community of care and support and accountability around the sex offenders, and the success that is achieved with that by reducing recidivism rates and reoffending. So I think the concept of a circle or a community of support and accountability, which would then have to be a different community that people can be meaningfully engaged. I think there is evidence that can work. But again, this will not come for free. The volunteers can only do so much. But if you have that in place and find ways for people to be engaged in social enterprises, so meaningfully engaged in a social enterprise context, and I can speak more about social enterprises. We do run a few of them, and we have seen the success of that. Because what happens now, people come out of treatment, and because there is no other caring community that wrap around them, they do in the end gravitate back to where they should not go. I mean, they would tell us that, and I think you all probably have the same story.
So when you mention community, is that like peer community or geographic
It could be peer. I mean, there's tremendous benefit and significance attached to peer communities, but I think it cannot only be a peer community. I think it has to be a mix of peer and other types of communities. But it is, it comes back to services, to support, to be meaningfully engaged, and to feel with, and to feel that you're valued and that you have a purpose to live for in the day that is ahead of you. So,
to an end. We know how important is work, being meaningfully and meaningfully engaged and in our lives.
Yeah, good point. Everyone needs someone to believe in them, that's for sure. Councilor Croft, you can face your
Okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the presentation. Of course, sitting on council for a couple of times, I know that there's been many of these reviews where people are doing counts on homeless people and trying to look at the best model to resolve the issue. And it's been going on for quite a few years. Seems like it's getting clearer, though, that there's kind of maybe three groups. There's a group of addicted people, there's a group of displaced people that really don't want to live with any kind of restrictions. And then there's another kind of group, it seems like, that are people that would really welcome the help and would be looking forward to that. Is there any way that anybody would be interested in focusing on getting the people that really want to be helped first, for example, just so that there's some headway, or there's some movement, there's some success to keep people wanting to do the job, because it must be almost disheartening sometimes, because there's not enough success, it seems.
Yeah,
I feel that way anyway.
No, I think the practice that frontline organizations are involved in is based on the principle of choice, people's readiness to want to work on their issues. If that is not there, then the chances of success are very slim. So I think that is the approach that we follow. It is to find the way to convince or persuade someone to get to that point where he or she needs to take responsibility and want to be part of the treatment process in order to make changes. And people do that. We know that that people fall back. We know that addictions. I think our knowledge of addictions have increased tremendously. If you look at the work by Dr. Gabor Matea of the Downtown East Side, what he has come up with and his studies and his research and others as well, I think we understand addictions much better now, and there are better practices, emerging practices that I think do show a lot of promise, but it does take resources to get that in place.
So even if you had the people that were wanting to be helped, if you don't have any paid satellite centers for immediate response, you kind of lose people off the grid.
Yeah, that is part of what happens. And other basic practical things like, in Abbotsford, where we are located on Dallas Avenue, issues like where do people go to just be for the day, where they can be welcome, because to expect for them to be for businesses to allow usage of foyer space or shopfront spaces or waiting areas or washrooms doesn't go well with business. We just know that you cannot mix that. But the result is, in the absence of a place where people can be, where do they go? They end up on the bus stops, they end up on the sidewalks, they end up using corners and alcoves for washrooms, to be crass about it. Something as basic as a washroom is an issue. There is nobody typically wants to allow their washroom to be used, for good reasons, given the behavior that sometimes is happening. So I'm not saying that I'm not trying to judge businesses. We run businesses too on Dallas Avenue, and we understand the challenges. And so, but at the end of the day, people have no place to go. Unfortunately, they have some, but it's limited. And then speaking of getting away from where the temptations are and the vices are, then it's not there.
Additional comments from council?
One question.
Okay, Councilor Memo?
Thank you. The one side interesting about where people come from, the previous communities of residents, just that shows the FBRD, this is for specifically Hope and Boston Bar. Is there a provincial count number, is that on the rise or the decrease?
Yeah,
Are people just moving around the province typically, or is there an increase or a decrease in homelessness?
We have discussed that today at the meeting that I referenced, and we will be doing some deeper analysis now to see what is the picture emerging. The number of homeless people in Metro Vancouver also increased from 2014. We want to, and we are going to track and make comparisons as to, you know, what is the picture across from Vancouver to Boston Bar. We know that given what has happened in the economy in Alberta the last year and a half or two has certainly contributed to people coming this way. But we also want to look at the latest census data that's becoming available now to see what is the movement of people nationally and what are the drivers of that. So looking at general population patterns of migration compared to homeless patterns of migration would be something that we want to look into. So we hope to have something for municipal governments and city governments across from Vancouver sometime in the fall.
Additional comments? Thank you, Mr. Van Wyck.
You're welcome.
Very much appreciate your time, and hold me to that lunch. I will buy one. Because that was a long wait for you, but we appreciate it.
We've been waiting with you.
Yeah, that's kind of our job, isn't it, Mr. Van Wyck's job, so.
No lunch here.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Moving on to staff reports, we have item 7A, a report from our Director of Finance pertaining to the 2016 audited consolidated financial statements. As our auditor indicated, everything is as it is supposed to be. So recommendation is that the 2016 consolidated financial statements of the District of Hope be approved, and further that the independent auditor's report be received, and further that the independent auditor's report be attached to the consolidated financial statements of the District of Hope. Motion that effect, please. Councillor Stewart moving, Councillor Erickson seconding. Mr. Cordes, comments, additional comments?
Not really. I thought everything went really well. We got underway a lot earlier this year. Staff did a wonderful job getting everything prepared. And I think we're a little bit earlier than we were last year, so that was fine for us. So yes, very happy with everything.
Thank you. Okay. Additional comments? All those in favor? Contrary? Carries. Mayor and councilors' reports. I think given the time we're dealing with, I'll keep it as short as possible. A couple of neat things to report here. Attended a volunteer coordination function today. Run by Jody McBride. It was a nice event to attend, and I invited Ms. McBride to a future council meeting, and she seemed very keen. A number of folks involved, Ms. Richardson, who's involved in some training programs, Advantage Hope was there. I think it's going to be a very successful initiative, and I think one of the biggest problems Hope will have in the future is the depletion of our senior established volunteers. So I think an initiative run by Ms. McBride and company will work well. So I look forward to having a council presentation to indicate how that program is going to help out in soliciting more volunteers within our community. A couple of quick things on a lighter note, something actually I could have brought forward at the last meeting. I attended a plowing competition for mayors and council members from down the valley. I came in second. It appears I was speeding while driving the plow because my rows were not organized enough. So one of the farmers said, we're driving too fast. So I don't know, slow speed bores me. So I was going a little too fast, so there we go. Came in second, number 4. What's that?
You actually know how to drive.
Yeah, I did win in the past, but I was a little, I was obviously not on my game this time, so there we go. I got plowed under into second. And then attended a tee-off at the golf club a couple of weeks ago, and that was to recognize the new owners, the new operators of the facility, and they seem like a really keen and eager young couple who were experienced. And I think they've already done some really cool upgrades to the building, and they're continuing on the path that the Crowns did to cater to weddings and events. But I think building on that as well, so that was good. I did tee off, and in the interest of public safety, I kept the ball on the ground, moving at a low velocity, because you don't want any humans or squirrels to get hurt, so I didn't hit the ball too hard. Couldn't actually, a couple of the, yeah, I think Mr. Orr is president of the golf club, he kind of put it in orbit there somewhere, so he did quite well. So I'll keep the rest for the next meeting, and maybe we'll start with Councillor Smith.
It'll be simple, nothing to report.
Okay, well, that's in line with the laid hour, thank you. Councillor Dowell?
Nothing to report.
Okay, Councillor Stewart?
Well, you're gonna make me look bad. Oh, well, I do have stuff to report. So, I attended the Golden Agers meeting, and, they started off on a light note. Very pleased to have received a call from Public Works, seeing how they can work productively together, and it was a woohoo moment, which is really good. Also, they had their spring tea. They had over 85 people attend their spring tea with a total revenue in of $1,806, and they'll have to take their expenses off. But all in all, a really, really good event. No requests from Golden Agers at this time. Oh, there is. They're going to be doing some cleanup on their building. If anyone in the community is interested in volunteering to help out with some of the higher stuff, like washing up high walls or helping scrub out some of the moss that's on the outside, just give them a call. Also attended the volunteer kickoff week today with cake and yummy stuff. Also, one more thing I'll just bring up. I've been approached by some people who live on the 753 water system. And their anxiety is growing because they feel like they don't know what's going on, and they had hoped to have results by now. They also feel that, you know, the anxiety of their bills going up in September due to an increase, it's just causing a lot of unrest out there. And I'm hoping or wondering if we could put an update maybe in the district news at the excerpt of the paper, just on 753, and you know, maybe where are we at? Are we getting anywhere? How can we help them feel less anxious about the events that are taking place there? I can't read my writing. There was something else I was supposed to.
Backyard burning and tourism committee.
Okay, so yeah, sorry, the tourism community. I wasn't able to attend because of the budget meeting that was also here, but I did get an update from some of the people who attended. And it was well received. They had a really good facilitator, and they're eager to have their next meeting on May 3rd. They would like to see more people who own hotels attend the meeting because it's around the hotel tax. And so if anyone who owns hotels, or even just people who would be interested in attending, could get in touch with the Info Center, Tammy, to let them know they're interested. It's May 3rd. And that'd be really cool. Backyard burning, one thing to bring up is that with the nicer weather, a lot of people are using their fire pits, and I would personally like people to be respectful when someone's line or clothes are on the line, or you know their windows are open. Just knock on the door, say hey, we're having company or whatever. Just be respectful of burning. I too like a fire pit, but be respectful of our neighbors, and that breeds goodwill. So that'll be it. Thank you for.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. And then Mr. Perlowski pertaining to the 753 issue.
Right, if I can answer some questions, Your Worship. So we have finally received the engineer staff report, reference 753 that we asked for. So we are going to present a report to you first, not the public, clearly at the next council meeting. We're going to have the engineers come forward and give a presentation. And ideally, it'll be at the same meeting.
They've yet to confirm their attendance, so it'll be a meeting.
Yeah.
Right. So, and of course, Kevin and the rest of the staff, the Director of Operations rather, we're looking at it, and there are some large implications as council has expected.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Medlock.
The only thing I have to report is that we have an eventual meeting tomorrow that I will attempt to attend.
Sounds good. Thank you, Councillor Medlock. Councillor Erickson.
Yeah, I attended a Chamber of Commerce meeting, and just to make it public, there's going to be a all candidates meeting on Wednesday at 6:30 at the room above the arena. What's that called back there?
This Wednesday?
Conference room.
The conference room. Yeah, and Ray Zabrini will be the moderator of the all candidates meeting. Everybody's welcome and bring your questions.
Sounds good.
So, all I have to report.
Okay.
Mine's short and sweet as well, thank you. Just wanted to remind everyone that the Park Street Manor has always got rooms available for people that are seniors that would like to downsize and live in a nice quality homey environment. And we have great staff there, and we have good food and entertainment, and there are rooms available. And if you know someone that's looking for something and it's quite a reasonable monthly fee, that's the place to go, Park Street Manor.
Okay, sounds very good. Thank you. Thank you to council for those reports. Moving along to permits and bylaws, starting off with A, zoning amendment bylaw 1385-2017, pertaining to 5266 6th Avenue. As council recollects, and this is on page 49 here, as mentioned, as council recollects, we had a meeting about that a couple of weeks ago, and so the suggested motion is to adopt as we discussed. Okay.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded, Councillor Stu and Councillor Crop, and that's pertaining to the property directly across from the Pocahontas Elementary School. Okay. Comments or questions from council? All those in favor? Contrary? Carries. Thank you. Item B, pertaining to the Land for Development Expenditure Reserve Bylaw number 1388-2017. Recommendation that District of Hope Land for Development Expenditure Bylaw number 1388-2017 be adopted this 24th day of April 17th. A motion to put on our table, please, and then we can have a quick discussion. Okay. Councillor Erickson and Councillor Dybel seconding. And through to Mr. Portalowski, why is this exciting for the District of Hope?
Your Worship, I think it's more exciting for the operations department in that this small parcel of land that's has been offered at a very reasonable price will allow for greater flexibility for emplacement of infrastructure, specifically water infrastructure, but other infrastructure we may need to put up there on Ross Road to service those residents up there.
Okay, thank you. Motion's on the table. All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carries. So item C, our issue from tonight pertaining to the public hearing. Now, looking at the level of discourse we have from the public and the interest from the developer to develop, obviously I'm here at the discretion of council as far as what council does, but I think given the discourse that was had tonight, I think it would be very valuable to go back on this issue. Obviously, the property will eventually be developed in some fashion, but I think since there is essentially no interest from the neighborhood to pursue this particular proposed development, I think there has to be some sort of a development proposed that is respectful of the OCP, which densifies somewhat, yet includes the interests of the neighbors. And I don't know exactly what that creature would look like at this point, but it appears very obvious that there is very limited appetite for the housing as presented. So that's just a suggestion to council. Obviously, we'll have discussion here. So I invite council comment. Councilor Miller.
Very good. Thank you. I guess my comments, we'll start with comments and they have some questions attached to them. So one of the questions that I wrote down and brought up already was about the ownership of the trees, because the trees is an issue. So if the majority of the trees are owned by the District of Hope and we have say in whether they come down or not, that does sort of solve that one potential problem of the trees being eliminated. So I'd like to kind of know where we stand with that. I don't know if that's the right process to take, is to find out that ahead of moving forward. but I think that that will answer some of the concerns of the residents that voice their concerns. The other question I had surrounding the trees was about the protection of them and what was allowed currently. So I think it's important for council to realize that as it stands, the landowner can still remove any of the trees that are on his property as per the current zoning, because our tree protection bylaw is not applicable in residential zones. The other comment I wanted to make on the same sort of line of that is that, you know, currently the house is available for rent, but if he was to tear that house down and build 2 single-family residences as permitted, there's nothing to say that those would not be rented out again. So these are just things to keep in mind, you know, with the 4 homes being identified as being for sale and not for rent. I think that might alleviate some of the concerns that were brought up as well. Around the OCP and the idea of densification, so obviously that is a direction that the community has put forward in the IOCP. It was a very public process that spanned the course of a long time and had lots of public comment. This is perhaps the first sort of test of the intent of that in the IOCP, and maybe we're not quite there. Something else to perhaps consider would be the RS1S zone, which seems to be an option. Based on the square footage of that property, it would still not even allow for 3, because later in the report here, later in our agenda, we have one of those coming forward as well, and the information in there says that a minimum lot size for that zone is 4,950 square feet. So using the square footage of 120 by 120, you wouldn't even be able to get 3 in. It's really close, it's like 2.9. But just thinking about that, the property size and what that zone is already allowing for without a comprehensive development, would allow for, would almost allow for, like we're talking just a few square feet difference, right? 3 homes, single-family residences with carriage homes, and the question I have is about the density on that property, like the size of the homes and the lot that are allowed to go on that land. Is it up to 45%?
That's correct.
So what we're looking at here in this particular proposal is this is 4 homes with carriage houses with a approximately 30% site coverage on those lots. So they are smaller than the RS1S zone, by quite a bit in square footage. The site coverage is a lot less, so they're not as dense, if you will, as if you had 3 lots with the maximum density. So these are all the different things I'm considering. I'm hoping that we can have some sort of discussion around this. I don't want to be the only one to talk. I'm just looking at the other potential options and the impact to the neighborhood of those other options. So in the initial report we got, we also talked about an application that came forward 8 or 9 years ago for a multifamily development. There's lots of concerns there, and it sort of died. I don't think it was carried forward with, but some of the concerns were the same. They were the trees, they were parking issues, and looking at the math on that for a 12-unit multifamily, the factor is 1.5 parking stalls per dwelling plus 0.2 for visitor parking, so it would work out to roughly close to the same, to the 16. So maybe that concern is still valid today. I know I'm going back and forth on this, but it's because I'm stuck in the middle. I don't know where to go with it. I would like to see the density increase, but maybe this is too dense. Maybe we need to take a look at a step back and see if the developer would be interested in the RS1S zone or maybe a CD zone, but more closely aligned with the RS1S. I'll let other people talk.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Devon?
Thank you, through you. I too, I appreciate your thoroughness.
Yes.
So that's very good. I appreciate the fact that this is sort of a new animal that we're dealing with. And I hope the developer, Mr. Esau, that you'd be willing to work with the district on going in this process, but going maybe a little bit slower and not as great an impact in that one particular corner, because it, to me, what it feels like is that corner is so pivotal in our community with Christ Church right there and Memorial Park across the street. It just feels like there's something sacred about that area, so to speak, to all of a sudden put 4 homes and 4 carriage houses right in that area. It doesn't feel like it's a fit for me, and I'm about vision and looking forward and recognizing that Hope has a unique character to it, and we want to preserve that character, but yet we also recognize that there's a need for densification. I mean, a 0% rental rate is concerning for Hope. So I think that, you know, when I have gone through this and around it and heard all the concerns, you know, my feeling is that I can't support this particular application, but what I could look at and what I would hope is that we would be able to go at it slowly together in a process that would fit for the community and it would fit for the developer. That's sort of where I want to look at. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Crop and Councillor.
Okay, thanks. So I appreciate everybody actually coming out and, you know, and doing all the homework and writing all the letters and all of those things. Even people that couldn't make it still made an effort to make sure that, you know, they had some concerns that needed to be addressed, and that's very important. It's good for the developer to know, it's good for us to know as council and staff. Memorial Park in past different surveys that we've sent out and spent thousands of dollars on in the last 20 years that I can think of, Memorial Park has always been classified as the jewel of the community, the heart of the community. And I really struggle as well because I know that the IOCP says, you know, and the approving officer's got a tough job because it's not, you know, final say is his. So, I mean, ultimately it's pretty tough. It's not easy. But the IOCP is a guiding map of what everybody in the community feels should be happening. And it's a public document that's created by the public. And everybody understands that nothing's going to stay the same, that's for sure. I understand that. I want it to, but I know that it's not going to again. What I don't like is I don't like the Purple House. I don't like the landmark of the Purple House. I feel that it's offensive because it makes me feel like people don't care about our community. And the people that are homeless or living in places they're renting one room, and you know, they're living in a purple house. It doesn't give them, I'm sure, the feeling of self-respect that they want to try a little bit harder and get doing stuff or seek help or any of those things. The property is a developer's property, Mr. Esau's property, and his partner's property. It's not really my right to tell him what he needs to put on there in such a way that, I mean, we're dealing with an application that he's presented to me anyhow, that we have to look at both sides on here. And one of the sides is the developer's coming forward. He does not have a finished plan, but we get the overall idea like we would with any application, I guess, that doesn't have a finished plan. When we have to look at a rezoning, we have to look at what the intent is, and then what the quality, to me anyhow, what the quality of life is going to be for the people that are there. Right now, the quality of life for everyone that lives on that block and everyone that lives in Hope and loves Hope knows that it's not the greatest at the moment because of the people that are living in the house, unfortunately, don't take ownership of the house. If they were renting a room and they loved where they lived and they were taking ownership of the house and they felt comfortable there, that would be one thing. They wouldn't be, you know, creating a lot of issues and concerns with the neighborhood. And we wouldn't really probably be having this much of a discussion about this property. if we do nothing and we don't go forward on this, we'll have the same purple house and we'll have the same issues, if not worse. You know, it happens, it seems to grow. If we go forward and trust that the developer is going to really recognize that we have some big concerns here as a community, not just as council, but as a community. I mean, if I had a wish list, I'd say, hey, how about you think about doing 3 homes and 3 carriage houses? The reason being, because if my son was younger and he was still here, I'd probably need to be helping him out, and I'd probably kick him out to the back carriage house and he could live there and work and do those things. If my mother was still alive, she'd love to be living in a house that was on the same property and having her own space. Those kinds of things. So there's a lot of bonuses to having a carriage house. Yeah, you might want to call it a mortgage helper. I don't. I call it a family helper, because that's really, I mean, we're looking at those kinds of applications coming forward more and more, because people realize it's getting so expensive to live that we do need to have, you know, family a little bit closer. And so that's how I look at the carriage houses. I think if you have a brand new building replacing the old purple house that is now dilapidated, and the property is sitting on 2 lots, and you're paying, you know, 2 different taxes for one house on the property, doesn't really make sense. So, you know, the applicant has to do what he feels is correct, and it's not really my business at this point in time to tell him what to do. But if I had a wish list, I would wish that he would consider making the denseness a little less dense. And that's that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Crop, Councillor Ernst.
Through you again, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to speak regarding the development costs regarding this property. I understand what it costs, I know what it costs to develop a piece of property, but what I was hearing tonight, and maybe it's just me hearing it, most of the people were concerned about not knowing what is going to be there. You've given us some pictures, but they don't know what the perimeters of the property are going to look like, the sidewalk, and the curbing, and the back alley, and the access and egress into that clearly. I think if, you know, and I talked to Jazz a little bit about it, I think if you as a developer, Mr. Esau, would say, listen, I'll go to the expense of putting some nice sidewalks in, I'll pave the back alley to that property that we needed and put some fencing in to make it really nice and clean that corner up, I would think that the neighbors would be more appreciative. It sounded like the neighbors were more concerned because they didn't really know what the perimeters are going to be like. Or maybe it's too dense for them with what you have there. So, I mean, to me, as I looked at it, and I went and looked at the property, and it really needs something, and I think we as a district have to do something. But maybe I think the densification might be a little bit too much. 4 there, and if you improve the sidewalk area of the property, I think that would really be a big plus for the community.
Councillor Stewart.
So just to weigh in, I'm also sitting kind of teetering, because I do believe in densification as well, and I'm not afraid to help grow. I know that it's difficult for some people to accept change and to visualize what change might look like, and we do get held back sometimes by that fear of what the future is going to look like. And so my personality is more of I embrace my future and hopefully take a positive approach to what it's going to look like. That being said, 4 is really hard for me to visualize, because it is the beginning stages of understanding diversification and density. I like the 3 compartments with the carriage house. I like that idea, and I'm trying to wrap my head around 4 and making sure that our sewer system and water system can handle that type of pressure. So I love the future. I want to make sure that the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. So I'm still undecided at this point. If I had to vote right now, which I'm guessing is going to happen, I would have to say no.
Yeah, I think the thing that, and I think everyone around the table does this, we deal with the facts of the situation and not the emotion of it. And I think the facts are clear, and the surrounding neighbors are not in favor of this. The issues pertaining to parking, I think they're very realistic assumptions. The fact that some people, maybe half, maybe less, who knows, of folks do not use their garage to house their vehicle, and that there will be, you know, extra vehicular clutter in a laneway or streetway, which is already fairly congested. The apprehensions from the neighbors pertaining to the ownership of the property, and I'm certainly not here to pick a fight with the landowner, because that's not appropriate, but I think dealing with the facts, I think if you know, respect to the neighbors was a guiding light here, we wouldn't necessarily be in this situation. So the reality is, the way to clean this property up is to renovate it and attract a different clientele of rental clients. So that is a practical way to clean up this property now. It does not necessarily have to be redeveloped into, you know, 4 houses plus 4 carriage houses. I am very open-minded to a densification that is less than the 4 houses, less than the 4 carriage houses. You know, I think we do have to embrace the IOCP, and I think the majority of the neighbors recognize that council is here to make tough and awkward decisions, and I think this, whatever we do, will be a tough and awkward decision. It will not please everyone, but you know, I just can't embrace the proposal in front of us at this point based on the public sentiment, and I think Councillor Dival's point about the corner was a very valid one. It's essentially our main historical corner, and to go from the most historical landmark in our community to the most urban development and all, you know, a laneway apart is maybe a bit of an awkward combination. So, you know, I think shooting this back to staff and Mr. Esau for some revisiting. Now, I certainly recognize Mr. Gill and staff put a lot of time and effort into presenting the plan as per the developer's request, and of course the developer paid his due fees, and I'm certainly not here to apologize for not granting the request, because that is obviously the development game, that you aim high and you probably recognize that you don't always get what you're looking for. You maybe get something that's a little watered down version of what you're looking for, but I think to be respectful of the neighbors is very important. To be respectful to the wishes of the community is important. Maybe we can come up with a, you know, a middle ground solution here that will keep everyone relatively happy. And I don't anticipate anyone being extraordinarily excited about, you know, a change on the property, but there's certainly room for improvement. And now you know, I mean, obviously there's 2 residential lots now. There could be, without even changing the property size, there could be 2 houses, and with some minor tweaking, could be 2 carriage houses right off the hop. You know, doing what we did across from the Coquihalla Elementary School, so that would turn 1 residence into 4 right off the bat without doing any major changing. Obviously, I guess from a development point of view, that would be less return for the developer, which is obviously, you know, unfortunate for him, but maybe that's something the community would buy into. 3 houses plus 3 carriage houses is obviously certainly less dense than the proposal. That might be something we could look at too. So I'd just like to shoot it back to staff and Mr. Esau for, you know, a second kick at it. And then, of course, that would necessitate another public process, but I think we have to be realistic here. If we move ahead with this, we'll be lynched, and we probably deserve it.
Your worship, procedurally then, the option is, if no one moves the motion, then it can come back to staff, or you can consider the motion, have a proposer, seconder, and then vote on the motion. So it's really how you want to approach it as chair, your worship.
Well, I think the approach would be we send this, by motion, send it back to staff for, you know, some new ideas.
Can I ask
Yeah.
a clarifying question? Thank you through you. So So, Mr. Gill, is it possible that we actually determine what trees are ours? Can we, how would we go about doing that? That seems to be the issue, and it sounds like the majority are ours, but we don't know that in fact for sure. Because if in fact, you know, the developer wants, he can just take down the house and put up two houses, one on each of the lots, and then the tree bylaw is not in effect, but we wanna make sure what trees belong to us. So we don't wake up one Monday morning and it's been clear cutted. Not that that would happen, but I'm just saying.
Your worship, for you, we would probably have to check with Public Works to find out, and it may even require a survey to find out exactly where road dedication ends and which part of the boulevard are the streets on.
So can that happen? Like, can we have a report back on that?
A motion to that effect would be very helpful, your worship, and we can expend any money that we need to get the survey done if required.
Well, I think that's a valuable part of the whole process, but I think first we have to send her back to staff and Mr. Esau to come up with some, maybe a couple of different options which are from a development point of view financially feasible, but something which take into account the concerns of the neighbors.
We can, sorry, your worship, we can see what data we have on the trees and present that for information. We may or may not have to do a survey.
Okay. But I think this issue is beyond just the trees.
Clear.
There's a, you know, a traffic clutter issue, there's an issue pertaining to, yeah, obviously the parking. And I think, you know, quite frankly, I think we have to have as much in our future decision that guarantees the sort of the welfare is a wrong term, but the welfare of the neighbors to ensure that their quality of life is as optimal as possible. Because their welfare has not been cared for by the landlord based on historical activity, and that's not a, I don't think that's a particularly controversial statement. That's just calling it the way it is. When you, as a neighbor, have to phone the police on a regular basis because the tenants next door are knifing each other, that's not a particularly savory, you know, thing you have to do. So I think, you know, I think the apprehension of the neighbors is warranted, and we have to do what we can to make sure that future concerns are dealt with ahead of time. Okay, Councilor Miller?
Thank you. My desire to go on to proceed with this, I guess, is to satisfy the IOCP and the process that we went through with there. So I guess my question through you to staff would be, the intent of the IOCP to increase density, do you feel, in your opinion, that the intent there was to do so through current zones that we have, like multifamily or the RT, the tenant suites, or the secondary suites with the carriage house, or was it to create these comprehensive development zones that don't necessarily fit into existing zones, but allow for that increased densification? Like, that's kind of how I'm feeling is I think that maybe the intent, based on the public feedback, is not to create these comprehensive development zones. But what's your opinion? Is what I'm asking.
Your worship, through you, I believe it's a combination of both. You know, there's sometimes innovation to creating certain types of utility of lands, be it what we have before us. This innovation, we don't want to ignore it. We still want to bring it through its democratic process.
Absolutely.
To see what we can
Test the
that's
design.
right. And council may also may be aware of this. Many years ago, there was also a cluster study done for housing types, and the incorporation or this idea isn't new. It's been around for some time. It's the first time it's probably been brought out to council, and hence why we're in this sort of predicament that we are.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I'm interested in making sure that the cluster study is the only thing that's clustered. You know what I'm saying? Because this could get really awkward really quick, and I think the reality is that you know, we do have to be respectful. I know obviously developments like this are very successful and are embraced in places like Garrison Crossing and so on. But folks that have talked to me that are neighbors are saying if I'd want to live in Garrison Crossing, I would have moved there. So we have to be somewhat respectful of those comments. And so, I mean, I think the motion could be as simple as sending this back to staff and Mr. Esau for developing some options that incorporate the concerns of the neighbors. And the discussion we had here tonight. Doesn't have to be anything more complicated. Councilor Kraft?
I will second if you move that, but the question is on process with the permitting fees and things like that. Does this sort of remain an open process, or does everything have to start over again procedurally?
Procedurally, would it just come back as that?
Well, you would have to rescind some readings. I mean, as it stands, Mr. Gill would probably have to redraft a completely different bylaw. So we'd be restarting the whole process again, and I don't think the fees and charges bylaw are part of us. So I'm not sure if Mr. Gill is aware of what fees would be for that.
If there are, I'm just aware of the developers, investment.
Yeah,
Trying to work with them.
I would imagine that to reconsider the property, the scope of the project, and Mr. Gill could probably answer it more appropriately, but I think he would be coming back with a pretty much brand new bylaw.
I mean, I personally think that the fees, if we can find a way to be very business friendly in that regard, I mean, this was essentially a test balloon. It was put out there. The public was very clear in what they said. Obviously, if there is densification of any sort, we're going to get money back in taxation revenue. So, the actual development fees are not a huge concern.
I'd like to see that part of the motion.
It would be nice to see how that could be done because,
I think it'd be clearer for staff if you incorporated that in the
Yeah,
motion.
yeah,
To waive any additional fees for bringing forward options.
Okay, so as amended.
yeah,
Second.
okay. Okay. Motion's on the table. All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carries. Thank you very much, council. Okay. I think I buried the last page. Oh, here we go. Look at this. I found it. So we're on to E, and that is District of Hope 2017 to 2021 financial plan bylaw 1391 2017. Okay.
Everyone,
Have a good night.
Thank you for your patience.
Okay. So we're on to item E here, the 2021 financial plan bylaw as mandated.
Move 3 readings.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Thank you.
Good job, Stephanie.
And then the annual tax rate bylaw 1392, 2017. Okay,
Second.
3 readings on that. Moved and seconded, Councillor Smith, Councillor Dybel, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our admin and staff for their hard work on this, the public for attending, and we're keeping it frugal, but keeping it real and productive, so I do appreciate all the work that council and everyone put into this. Discourse was respectful and productive as usual, as is our trademark here, so I do appreciate that. So motion's on the table. All those in favor? Contrary? Motion is carried. Thank you. And item G, zoning amendment bylaw 1393, 2017 for 65477 Copper Lake Road. And this is that the District of Hope zoning amendment bylaw number 1393, 2017 be given a first and second reading in order to rezone the property at 65477 Copper Lake Road from single-family residential zone RS1 to single-family residential with secondary dwelling RS1S, and further that the residents and public be notified of the public hearing in accordance with the District of Hope application procedures and public hearing information meeting procedure bylaw number 1393, Local Government Act and the Community Charter. And I think I'm officially an auctioneer after this meeting. We have a motion to that effect, please. Okay. Councillor Diamond, Councillor Medlock's moving and seconding, just the first part of the process here, so lots of time to talk about this.
I do have a question about the first part of the process. So as far as sending notice out to neighboring residents, does that include all of the residents of the mobile park behind?
That is correct, yes.
Wasn't sure if it was just within the radius. Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
You want me to sort of talk about the proposal here?
Maybe a little bit if you could, Mr. Gill, we're really on, but still we're talking about.
Okay, Your worship, through you, the applicant would like to rezone the property in order to construct a secondary dwelling in the carriage house design. The applicant has indicated that the secondary dwelling is intended to be for an aging family member who will require increased care in the next few years. To give you contrast, the property is about 18,295 square feet, so.
It's approximately 18,000, yeah.
How many carriage houses?
Yeah.
Yeah, so motion's on the table, all those in favor? Thank you. Correspondence, 11A, motion received.
I have a question about correspondence, I think.
Yeah. Mr. Smith? Okay.
I looked for the letter, the first piece there, the letter from the Prime Minister's office regarding the Building Canada Fund grant to the Pollution Control Center. I don't know, I couldn't find it, but maybe if I can get a copy of that sent back to me. File number 0400-40. Thank you. Yeah, I looked for it, I wanted to remind myself.
Yeah, it's worth giving them a copy.
Thank you.
If it's
Well, we
missing in
send it to
action.
council.
Sure.
Period.
Thank you. All those in favor? Contrary, motion carries. Now, this is, I would say, suggest an action item of council. This is a late item, as presented by Ms. Bellingham earlier. She added it under 11B. This is pertaining to a remedial order we have for the property owned by Mr. Madison, affectionately known as the Roundhouse property. So, Ms. Bellingham or Mr. Fodorowski, if you would, either of you would like to report on this?
If I can summarize quickly, then I'll pass off to our corporate services director. So we did receive a letter from legal counsel representing Mr. Madison and the process regarding the two properties in question. He has asked for an extension, 14-day extension. Well, I'll get Donna to talk about that. But in essence, a delay to allow him or somebody appointed to make representation to you. Because as you're aware, the representation period went and no one came. His legal counsel has wrote to say that Mr. Madison is out of the country for health reasons. I'll let Donna talk about the process. Our legal counsel has given advice that certainly our process wouldn't be threatened if council agreed to a delay.
So if council agrees to the delay on March or May 8th, Mr. Madison and or an appointee that he asked to represent himself to come to the meeting and state their case to council. If council chooses to follow with due course as already on the books, then we would just proceed with immediate action, or council could alternatively consider their information and maybe change your direction to staff on the remedial order.
Okay. So if Mr. Madison can be, if council's amenable to this, if council could be made, if Mr. Madison could be made well aware that we're not going to be chasing the roundhouse, around the roundhouse here indefinitely, that we want to see some action here sooner than later. So if we're open to this delay, that it would certainly be the final sign of goodwill here.
Final offer?
Yeah, because we have a legal process that's been engaged, and obviously.
Well, our municipal council will get in touch with this council, to let them know that if your council's agreeable, that they would have to send representation from you.
Yeah. And of course, the process does not allow for a doctor's note, but it's tempting to make that request. Councilor Pratt?
Thanks. And also, can we include in the letter that the matter will be dealt with that day? So that that's it, there's no more extensions and all that stuff?
Yeah, no, I think that we have to really. emphasize
Okay,
that
because
point.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, Councilor Medlock and Councilor Stewart.
I gotta say, I'm not really okay with it. We have a process that's in place, and I'd like to stick to that process. I know it's a very particular one where we have deadlines and dates, and I think that we've done a great job this go around with sticking to that, so. Interesting to hear that our solicitor suggests that our interest is protected, though, if we do decide to delay. There's no change, there's no way that he could say, well, the process wasn't followed properly and therefore, my gut's telling me that we should just proceed as planned.
I definitely appreciate that input, but my gut would be telling me the opposite, because if Mr. Madison did indeed have a health problem that he had to deal with, which is, I mean, we can't really prove that, right? But if he indeed had a health problem he had to deal with, that later on in a court proceeding comes out as something that, you know, matters were out of his control, he couldn't respond in a timely fashion, yada, 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 then of course, if we move without granting that extension, that I would argue would put us in legal jeopardy of, you know, this, Mr. Madison is legally reasonably feisty, I guess one could make that comment. So, yeah, he's litigious, I guess one could make that assumption based on correspondence that we've received. I think that's a fair comment. So, the last thing I would want to do is add legal ammunition on his end. So, as objectionable as I find the 2-week delay, I think to secure ourselves legally, it certainly makes a lot of sense. Arguably, this should be a discussion we should have in camera because it is a legal issue, but I think the public is very interested in hearing where we're going with this, so, you know, having a discussion here is probably something we can justify. Councilor Doyle?
Thank you, through you. So I sort of take the same stance as what Councillor Medlock has taken. I mean, he was given this information back February 14th. There was no comment with respect to being out of the country for a medical issue. It only had noted that he was out of the country and couldn't make the meeting. So it didn't indicate at that time that he had a medical condition, and now all of a sudden there's a medical condition that he can't be back until May the 8th. So as much as I want to be sympathetic, I don't know how much sympathy I got left in me here with respect to this particular issue, because it feels like it's just one more game to delay it for 2 more weeks, right? And then what happens? So I sort of believe I'm in the same position as Councillor Medlock on this one, that I think the ample opportunity's been granted, and this is just another ploy for 2 weeks.
But just to clarify, I'm hoping this doesn't delve into the in-camera, but the registered notes that we sent to Mr. Madison and his respective his numbered companies, none of them were picked up, correct?
Some have been unclaimed and some just returned to sender, so none were accepted. Every letter has come back.
So, I mean, there's certainly, from a procedural point of view, if he would come through with a doctor's note saying that, you know, he was in the hospital or doing whatever medically, and we move forward without giving that extension, I think we would put ourselves in legal hot water. So, this is going to be it's not going to be a pleasant situation regardless how council moves here because of the circumstances of it. So I just think we have to position ourselves in a place where we have, you know, all the legal ammunition in our corner is what I'm suggesting.
Well, the property's been in disrepair for a number of years, so, you know, one would argue with 2 weeks, a 2-week delay really cause any further harm.
Yeah, I think at this point it's an eyesore nuisance problem. It's not necessarily a public safety problem. Maybe if it was a public safety problem, it would be a different kettle of fish. But anyways, Councillor Stoon and Councillor Harrison.
So I just have a question. So we put the process in place, right, and everything was supposed to happen on April 30th. The 2-week delay, does that mean we start over again, or
No, we
what would
proceed.
happen?
So I did seek that clarification with our solicitors. So if on May 8th, say council does agree to this 2-week delay, then representation comes forward on May 8th. If council chooses to continue with due course, a full demolition, we will then proceed. There's no further delay.
The next day?
On May 9th?
Yeah, we could.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, Councilor Erickson?
So, I think when I read that letter and I heard there was a medical thing, I thought, well, how do we know the medical thing's gonna be resolved by May 8th? And then it's just gonna be continued, but if we can do what we have and there's no recourse, then I think I'll go along with the motion, or the agreement that we'll wait till then.
But
He could delegate someone like his lawyer to represent.
yeah, I mean, if he's in a position where he's well enough to send his lawyer to send his letter, he's probably well enough to say, hey, you're gonna act on my behalf as my lawyer, so
Sure.
there's, yeah.
I
So Mr. Madison or his legal designate.
Yeah, it could be any designate, as long as he's designated somebody who can't.
Yeah.
That's an excuse.
And we know for sure that these folks are actual lawyers from Mr. Madison. I'm serious. This has been a very interesting file to deal with, so.
From Abbotsford, so good chance.
He has companies supposedly all over, so my question is, can Mr. Madison come back and say, well, these folks weren't acting on my behalf? I think we almost need a letter of engagement indicating that these folks are acting on behalf of Mr. Madison, because it's been that interesting dealing with this individual that.
Well, we can make sure legal counsel covers that piece for us.
Yeah, I think it's very important.
I can Google them right now.
No, I'm suggesting, there's been so many interesting detours and twists and turns legally in this dealing with this gentleman that I think it's just important that we know that we're actually dealing with the legal representative, Mr. Madison, and not just someone that's writing letters.
Well, I think clearly we know that by the May 8th time, and that information will be provided to you then, if you so decide to grant an extension, and clearly it will weigh into the mix of evidence that you will use to judge the case.
Okay. So we have, do we have a motion here?
I'll make the motion that we delay till May 8th meeting.
Second.
And that Mr. Madison or his legally designated representative will be here to state his case.
And that May 8th is the absolute last date,
Yeah.
and that it will be dealt with on that particular meeting date.
Okay. Motion's on the table, moved and seconded. All those in favor? Contrary. Motion carries. Question period from members of the public. That was a rather lengthy one, 10 o'clock.
No.
Thank you all for coming. Next meeting will be May 8th.
Dinner time.
Yeah, no kidding.
Are you trying to chew your pen